Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charity Chart Show. This is Grayson Harris, and today we are joined by Katie Collins Erkey. She is the executive director of the ARC of Howard County, doing really incredible work and services and advocacy out there for her community. Katie, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks, Grayson. Great to be on.
Well, the ARC is quite a brand, right, across the United States. But for our audience that may not be familiar with the work, can you explain a little bit about what the organization really stands for, and specifically what the ARC of Howard County is really providing?
Sure. So, chapters of the ARC were founded in the 1950s and 60s all throughout the US. And it started as groups of parents looking for services for their children or a life. So, there was no right to education. And so, families were having to figure out at a young age what their son or daughters were going to do. So, the families got together and formed these chapters. There's now over 300 chapters of the ARC in the US. And in Maryland, the chapters of the ARC are provider organizations, meaning we do advocacy work for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also direct service and help people live their lives. So people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the same wants and needs that many of us do. They want to have a job, they want to have a home to live in with people they love. Some people want to have families, and we just help make that possible. We provide staff that can help people learn new skills, get into the community, get a job, keep a job. And then we also provide housing. And so we have about 30 different properties that we help people live out in the community. These are apartments and homes in your neighborhood, and just assisting people with getting out and just being a part of the world in which they're in. But that's basically what we do in a nutshell.
I love that. And as you have conversations with your community in Howard County, what maybe surprises you about what people don't maybe understand about the work of the ARC?
Yeah, that the people we support, I think, oftentimes people don't view them as people with wants, needs, and dreams and hopes. And with some people, it's hard to figure out what those dreams, hopes, wants, and needs are. But everyone has them. And I think, people can be fearful of disability because they haven't experienced it or they haven't been around it. With the increased focus on community integration of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we're just going to be seeing more disability out in our community. So, understanding that people are people, I think is really important. And that, the people who we support are neighbors. We're a community, and we're neighbors, and neighbors who can contribute and can, you know, be a good neighbor, which is always our goal.
Yeah, that I really appreciate you sharing that. And you mentioned that there's both the service really component, right, in terms of working hand in hand with the community or the IDD community, and making sure that they're able to really achieve all the wants and desires that they may have.
Yeah.
But then there's an advocacy arm, and I know right now you're really in the middle of the busiest season for you. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that piece looks like in Maryland and how that's going?
Yeah, so last week we embarked on our legislative session in Annapolis, Maryland. It's a quick 90-day session, and the legislators just received the governor's budget this week, and so we're going to be quite busy in the next couple of months. What we're seeing in Maryland is budget cuts
Mm.
to services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and so that on top of the federal landscape, where we're also seeing potential cuts to Medicaid, which funds these critical community services that we provide. We're trying to protect what we have and ensure that we can continue providing for the people that we support.
And you mentioned some potential cuts coming down the pipeline, right? And that definitely affects your organization. But the reason that matters is that affects the community that you serve. Can you speak a little bit more to what that really means for the community that the ARC Power County serves?
Sure. So for an organization, we have so much funding to go around. And so when there are issues like budget cuts, that inhibits our ability to really go above and beyond for people. The funding that we get it can be quite limiting. And so making sure that we are looking at it from a human perspective, but also a business perspective. It's meshing those two together to make sure that people are getting what they need. It's not detrimental. So it's really quite a balancing act when we see things like budget cuts. We were cut last year as well. And so really trying to be very creative with how we can help people when there are budget cuts, because what ends up happening is people get less services. And, that is not a good place to be when we really these are critical services. These are oftentimes life and death services that are required. So to blend those two, the real impacts to the people we support and the impacts to the organizational sustainability are key points.
You mentioned facing this last year. What were you able to accomplish in the sense of looking at those 2 pieces and really navigating that puzzle? What allowed you to kind of navigate it, despite some of these, really incredible challenges?
Well, I will say that we are very fortunate that we are a 65-year-old organization. And we had, our board directors over the years and our leadership has had the foresight to put money aside when we've had good years. Because when we have good years, we know that we've been through the bad years and they're going to come around again. So I think that's a huge piece of it is, being able to plan for the future and have that nest egg. So we do have that. And then, just trying to figure out how you can shift. So when we got the budget cuts in the last year, we just shifted. We had to figure out other ways to get money. And so that's where, things like donations and grants and all those wonderful philanthropic endeavors come in to kind of help us on the
Understood. Whenever you're talking to a donor now as you're facing some of these challenges and some budget cuts, what is the balance that you're striking in terms of communicating this real need? As you mentioned earlier, it could potentially be life and death, right? That impact, but then also still really coming across as a place of, foundational trust and stability and that sustainability, right? It's a fine balancing act. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I think it's really important to be clear the impacts that we're potentially facing and have faced, and really understanding and communicating to our donors that these are the places where we're being impacted. And, we are fortunate to be able to kind of sail through that, but we only are able to do that because of donations, because of donors, because of that extra support that we get. And so I think I would just be honest with the donors that we are here. We are not closing our doors, but times are hard. And, when times are hard in your community, you need your community to step up. And I think that's the message. Like we, you know, really appreciate our donors. We adore that, they believe in our mission and that they're supporting us. But at the end of the day, we always need more. And most nonprofits will tell you that, there's just never enough to do what we want to do with the resources we have.
Understood. That's really and then you mentioned, pivoting, right? In terms of also then I guess prioritizing what internal services that are kind of the must-haves versus like may have to go during some of these challenging times. Internally, how are those discussions and what's some of the I guess outcomes of those as well?
So, when you think about what services in your nonprofit, I think it's important to understand a few things. First is the financial sustainability of such a thing. Also, how closely is it tied to the mission? Is it mission critical that you're doing this? And when you take those two things and you find it's a fit, like you have to decide. Some programs you have are going to make money, and you're going to hope that they're going to be a good fit. Those are your superstars. But then there's other programs that don't make money, sometimes run at a deficit, and we have a few of those that we use funding that we from retained earnings to make up for donations and other services. So really understanding what is critical to the mission and also what is feasible for the organization to do at that time is really important. And I'm a big believer in not really just chasing the money. You really, you need to make sure it fits with what you're trying to do. And because otherwise, I think organizations get confused.
Understood. Well, have you had to turn down funding that wasn't a good fit in the sense of that mission alignment as well, and potential grants that were going to maybe drift, right? That mission drift that nonprofits are oftentimes dealing with.
Yeah, no, all the time. And it really is like an internal analysis of, again, like the financial feasibility, oh, and also the organizational capacity to do it. And then the mission part of it, like how true is it to our mission? How critical is it that we have this service as part of our mission? So I think both of those pieces are really important.
And on that mission piece, right? I think something that I've talked about with some other leaders is this aspect of, maybe it's not a good fit for our direct organization, but here's an incredible partner that we work day in and day out with. Developing these partnerships and relationships in the community, has that really enabled you to as well really stay narrowed in, and then maybe outsource a potential program to a partner organization?
Absolutely. In fact, when I first started, I was given an opportunity and for a new service, new funding stream, and I really thought about it. And while it did kind of align with the mission on the outskirt, it wasn't fully our mission. And so I did. I recommended another agency that I thought would be a better fit to take that on. And so that happens. That happens often. And I think part of what I love about working in the Howard County space, the collaboration that takes place between community organizations and the ability to reach out and have those connections. Because as we talk about resources and limitations with our resources, we realize that collaboration is a really important tool because we can't do it alone. We
Mm.
don't have enough resources, so we need to partner together and magnify,
Yeah.
multiply our impact to really make an impact.
That's great. I'm so happy to hear that that is, a part of the culture, of Howard
Yeah.
County, for your nonprofit community. That's incredible to hear. Well, I guess, as we're looking to, the rest of 2026, it's still January. It's still, a really exciting time. We still have the year ahead of us. What has got you excited? You have this big, legislation, undertaking going on right now. Anything else that's on the horizon that's got you excited?
My job is exciting because I get to see people living the life that they want, so that's always exciting. But of particular interest is, this is our 65th anniversary this year. It's our Sapphire, anniversary, and we're gonna be celebrating at a new event, that we've created to replace our chocolate ball that we used to do, and it's called Chocolate and Cheers. It's a more of a cocktail attire, not a giant gala, but it's gonna have chocolate, it's gonna have great food, lots of great cocktails, dancing, it's gonna have great band, and we're gonna raise money for the ARC. You can't get much better than that. Plus, there's gonna be chocolate, and we're gonna be celebrating people who've made an impact on our Howard County community, the disability community here at that as well by recognizing honorees of our, Celebration of Excellence awards.
Amazing. Well, that's super exciting to hear. And when is that?
It's gonna be May 9th. It's
Okay.
gonna be at the Laurel Jockey Club, so very exciting right before, some of the big races start. So yeah, we're gonna be, hanging out there and dancing and eating chocolate and having a great time.
That's amazing. How can our audience listening in get involved with the work of the Arc of Howard County?
The easiest way is to visit our website, or our Facebook, connect with us there. You can email info@archhoward.org,
Okay.
that's always a good way, or just give us a call. That also works. But, yeah, we're here. We're wanting to talk to you. We're wanting to connect and figure out how we can make Howard County even better for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Amazing. Katie, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and, sharing more about the journey that's unfolding for your organization, and the incredible work that you're doing out there as well.
Thanks, Grayson. It's been great.